In my keynote at the summit, I talked about the broken promise of technology. And that broken promise is rooted in the sense that technology has always promised to make things more efficient, to do things faster, to provide us with easier lives, right? That's the false hope that the current state of technology has not just hasn't delivered it, period. And instead, how many of us are slaves to our phones? You can't get through a meal with your family without somebody picking up a phone. It's just true of all of us. And when we still call these things phones, we've heard it how many times, but what we carry in our pocket is more powerful than what we use to send our first men to the moon, right? Like these are not phones. These are microcomputers that we are attached to almost physically, and they're a tremendous leash for us. And it's not just about using them more often than we should and that addictive nature to it, but it's also recognizing the fact that it has changed our economic models, or it has changed how we operate. Our economic models actually have not changed, and that's part of the big challenge that I'm getting at here.
Welcome to the Smart Cities Council podcast. Smart Cities Council is an international organization aiming to create a safer, more beautiful, enabled, and resilient future for everyone, with more than 400,000 members and collaborators across the globe. Today, I welcome Michael Lake from Leading Cities to the podcast, a speaker at the Smart Cities Summit North America. Mike, may I ask you to introduce yourself and your organization to the audience?
Of course. Thank you, Fanny, first of all, for having me. And as you said, my name is Michael Lake. I'm the founder and CEO, president of Leading Cities. We're a global nonprofit organization headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts, but we operate in every corner of the globe. In fact, we'll work with any city, any size, just about any location, so long as they're looking for support in terms of building greater sustainability, greater resiliency in their community. And that's our mission, is to drive sustainability and resiliency in communities worldwide.
Since we are talking because of the Smart Cities Summit, before we jump into other terms, I would love to ask you to describe what does smart city mean to you?
I feel like smart city as a term, generally accepted term, has evolved over time. I will say I am glad that not every conference we go to these days has every other session about defining it. But I still think all of us have our own definitions. And for my definition, it's really about building communities, not just cities, communities that are smart, not just smart in terms of technology or technologically enabled, but smart in terms of greater resiliency, greater sustainability, communities where individuals have the opportunity to live peacefully and thrive and to grow into that community in the ways that are meaningful and purposeful to that individual. And that's ultimately what it's about. I also think there's an important piece of sustainability and resiliency that sometimes gets overlooked, particularly on the resiliency piece, that it's not just about being resilient to natural disasters or whatever it might be, but it's also about how quickly community can bounce back from such a tragedy, and making sure that it's not just that preparedness piece, but that preparedness beyond, is so that people can get back to their livelihoods, they can get back into their homes, they can get back into that sense of community as quickly as possible.
This is how you understand resilience, that it is bouncing back from the shocks, from the stresses?
It's about being both prepared for and bouncing back. It's on the front end and the back end. And because the truth of the matter is, you can't bounce back as quickly as possible if you weren't adequately prepared. So they go hand in glove, as we say, but it is both sides. You can't just be prepared but not have a plan if something should happen and how you will bounce back. That's only half of the equation.
I'm glad you included the proactive nature of resilience, because that's very important, that we are not just reacting, but we are proactively preparing. Now,
and let me just say, everybody should be, because as we have seen, natural disasters, storms, their intensity, their frequency, it's all happening. We've had flooding in the mountains in America. There are wildfires in places that in recorded history have never had a single wildfire. It's almost nonsensical, it seems at times. But what it shows us and should be alerting everybody to is that no place is immune. Every place is susceptible. And it's not a matter of whether something will happen, it's a matter of when it's going to happen. And are you prepared for it?
I would love to ask you whether, in your experience, bouncing back is enough. Because, in my understanding, evolution happens, and with evolution, hopefully, we are becoming better. And
Absolutely.
thus, resilience for me, it's not necessarily enough without moving forward. So, I like to use the term anti-fragility because those systems which are anti-fragile, they learn from the shocks and they become better for the shocks. So I'm curious, how do you think about resilience, and is bouncing back enough in this sense?
To me, it would almost be foolish to bounce back to where you were before. So it goes without saying in the sense that just take Boston, for instance. There, though it doesn't happen as frequently as it used to, there are still moments when street work is being done or repairs to the water system, and we find still in operation wooden pipes. If we were going to bounce back from that, you'd have to be out of your mind to want to install wooden pipes again. So it's been said so often, I never know who to attribute the quote to, but and there's so many variations of it. The point is, you never want to waste a good crisis. And in the moment when a community is affected, whether it's a storm or flooding or whatever it might be, as devastating as that impact is, particularly at that moment, it does, looking at the bright side, it does create an opportunity for advancement. And I use the example of the water infrastructure because infrastructure itself, no matter when it was, it's no when the storm hits and that infrastructure is destroyed, it was already old. So by default, you have to improve on it. And it's I'll speak about the US specifically, but for decades we have been kicking the can down the road with deferred maintenance on our infrastructure. Our infrastructure is, fortunately, with the Biden administration and the tremendous $1 trillion investment in infrastructure, there's improvements being made. But we're seeing crumbling roads and bridges. We're seeing school buildings. It's just, you name it, the infrastructure is challenged. So we have a lot of work to do. In fact, that's part of the preparedness piece. And because though that aging infrastructure is even more susceptible to some whatever disaster might occur. And so better preparing for it, but also recognizing that bouncing back again is not back to where you were the day before the storm, let's say, but where you want to be in that moment in time, in this case, the 21st century. Where do you want to be in the 21st century? You don't have that legacy infrastructure to then contend with in the same way. It's an opportunity to just build anew.
We will get back to the opportunities, don't fret. But first, you mentioned sustainability, and now you just described resilience as moving forward, becoming better, adapting, and preparing. And sustainability can be understood as sustaining the current systems. So it can be at odds with resilience. I'm curious how you understand sustainability.
So the way I think of sustainability is probably more in the antithesis of sustainability. And what do I mean by that? I mean that for me, sustainability is not doing something that you cannot continue to do. Not that you shouldn't continue, that's a different topic, but that you cannot. The world, like society, humanity, cannot continue to grow the way we have been growing for decades. If we continue this for centuries at this point, if we continue this rate of growth, it's just unsustainable. So we have to think about systems that are sustainable. I mean, talking about fossil fuels, there's only so much of it. to continue using it at the pace we're using it, eventually it's going to run out. That's unsustainable. So that's what I mean about thinking of it in terms of the antithesis. It's about doing stuff so that we can prolong that which we need and how long we can survive at times. It's the same thing with clean air, clean drinking water. If we're destroying those two things, it's only a matter of time before humanity can no longer survive on this planet. That's unsustainable. So for me, sustainability it's an enabler for resiliency. And by doing things in a way, and I recognize we all use, even the most green among us, we all use fossil fuels, directly, indirectly. It's just part of the world. It's too invasive in humanity, in all of our cultures, to avoid it. But doing our part to be a little bit more green makes us that much more sustainable. It extends the goalpost, or the goalpost probably isn't, there's somewhere you want to get. We don't want to get to the end here, but the end zone, like we don't want to rush our way to the end of clean water, clean air, etc., or the end of fossil fuels for that matter, until we have a system in place that is completely independent of fossil fuels. To run out of fossil fuels would be devastating to just about everybody in one way or another, some more than others, obviously.
Which brings us neatly to the challenges. What are the biggest challenges in your field and in smart cities?
There's no shortage of challenges in this world. So it's a question of really where to begin here. But I would say, look, I'm going to prioritize this because you and I, we are all living in the period of greatest technological advancement in human history, right? The amount of data produced in 1 year is more than the first 5,000 years of human recorded history. That's the pace at which technology, data, whatever, the digitized world is advancing and growing is unparalleled in our history. Now, that oftentimes we associate with advancement and all the wonders and opportunities of that, but it comes with real challenges. And in my keynote at the summit, I talked about the broken promise of technology. And that broken promise is rooted in the sense that technology has always promised to make things more efficient, to do things faster, to provide us with easier lives, right? That's the false hope that the current state of technology has not, it just hasn't delivered it, period. And instead, how many of us are slaves to our phones? You can't get through a meal with your family without somebody picking up a phone. It's just true of all of us. And when we still call these things phones, we've heard it how many times, but what we carry in our pocket is more powerful than what we use to send our first men to the moon, right? Like these are not phones. These are microcomputers that we are attached to almost physically, and they're a tremendous leash for us. And it's not just about using them more often than we should and that addictive nature to it, but it's also recognizing the fact that it has changed our economic models, or it has changed how we operate. Our economic models actually have not changed, and that's part of the big challenge that I'm getting at here, which is to say that all of our economic models are based on labor, right? The value creation was labor, human labor. And the more you labored, the more value created, the more you were rewarded. Technology has changed that dynamic. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but we're still applying an outdated economic model, which means that the economics of technology and what it means for you and I, for anybody, is just not equitable. It's not equitable because more and more of the wealth that's generated, almost all of it, goes to the hands of just a very few number of people. And if you look from like about 1980 to today, productivity has increased over 60%. In that same time, wages, compensation has increased 18%. That barely covers inflation, which is to say that in almost 50 years, people haven't essentially gotten a raise. And meanwhile, the purchasing power of their dollar is not what it used to be. We keep talking about eggs in the US. This is a problem. It's a real problem. And the baby boomer generation, it's often been said, will be the first generation in American history to not leave the nation in better condition than it received it, to not leave the next generation with greater wealth than they had. That's just one example. But the reality is you can't keep up with this economic model and apply the old economic model and apply it to the current status. Because if you look, Oxfam did their annual report and they found that since 2020, the 5 wealthiest men in the world, they all happen to be men, the 5 wealthiest people in the world, doubled their wealth. Okay. In the same time, almost 5 billion out of the 8 billion people on this planet became poorer. That model doesn't work. That is unsustainable. That's sustainable for 5 people, but the rest of us are in. And so we have to be thinking about how we generate wealth based on data, based on technology, and make it dispersed equitably. I'm not saying evenly, but equitably. And to give you a sense, just looking at Meta last year, each user, just by existing, but just by having an account, by clicking, by looking, by viewing, by posting, whatever, each of us generated $41 in revenue for Meta. And we saw 0. We get no value of that ourselves. That is our actions. It's our opinions. It's our effort. It's our labor. And we don't get paid for it. Somebody else does. So to me, that's the greatest challenge because we're talking about the very fundamentals of existence for human beings, like in this world. Like we cannot survive in a world, in a capitalistic society where 90 to 99% of us are not getting enough money to survive. And that somebody else, the 1%, the 10%, are capitalizing on all of our value creation. So that to me is the biggest challenge. Are you sorry you asked?
No, I'm not sorry I'm asked because then I can ask you how to solve this. What are the biggest opportunities regarding the future of cities and smart cities?
So truth is, I don't profess to have the answers here. I'm not even going to profess that the examples I'm about to cite are the answers. I'm going to share these examples in hopes that anybody watching or listening to this might be inspired, might come up with another model, might think differently about the model we have, whatever it might be. That's what we need is we need more creativity to solve this challenge. And if you take a look at Finland instituted a pilot program of a universal basic income. I don't know about you, I think it's common knowledge, but the greatest argument against a universal basic income that I have always heard is that essentially, paraphrasing here, is people will be lazy, they'll take advantage of it. What they found is just the opposite. People who were receiving the universal basic income were more likely to be working. They were not only more likely to be working, they were happier in the work that they were doing. They felt comfortable because of that baseline, that there wasn't the threat of total bankruptcy, that they were allowed to explore something, whether it was going back for a more advanced degree, or whether it was starting a new business, or whether it was just exploring a new career path because they weren't happy in the one they had. That to me frees up the human spirit to seek what is purposeful and meaningful to that individual and be creative, right? The greatest thing that defines humans and separates us from all other species is that we are the only species, as far as we know, that can imagine the future and create it. To me, the universal basic income is just one example, one lever, one opportunity for us to be creative, to imagine what our future, the world's future, could be if we did something else. So that's one example. Second example is in California. Governor Gavin Newsom proposed data dividends. I'll be honest with you, I like the trajectory of where this is going. I don't exactly agree with all of it, but the general concept is that if you are producing data and somebody else is profiting off of that, then you have a right to some of that value. But now, personally, I think it should come back directly to you. The proposal, and by the way, I don't think these two things necessarily need to be mutually exclusive, but that the proposal in California was that it would go into the public sector, and therefore everybody would benefit with better parks, safer streets, et cetera, et cetera. But the root value of that is recognizing that even if it's not manual labor, as we think of work or labor in general, if you are creating value, you, the one creating it, should be benefiting from it, not somebody else, not somebody who is exploiting you, or as we know, this handful of companies that are extracting all of this value. At current trajectory, we are likely to have, it just changed from 1 to 5 trillionaires. I think it's by 2030. And to give you a sense of just how crazy that is, if we started to try and eliminate poverty, it would take us over 200 years to do it. So we will have 5 people that are trillionaires, which, I mean, it's like more than the GDP of Latin America, Africa, and I think Eastern Europe. That's in the hands of 5 people. There's nothing right, in my opinion, about that. No, in my general opinion, no one individual is worth that much more than any other. We are all made of flesh and bone, right? Okay, some people have a better idea than somebody else, and they should be rewarded for that. But because we're applying an old economic model to a new situation, it is allowing the concentration of wealth into so few hands that it's not just about the wealth, but it's a threat to national security of many nations when an individual or a corporation has greater resources than entire nations. That's something we should all be thinking about, because that is not smart. That is not smart city. That is not smart community. That's not smart region. That's not smart nation. That's not smart planet. Nothing about that is smart.
When we talk about smart, we also bring in technology usually. And you mentioned the broken promise of technology and brought in data a lot of times. However, you were also talking about thriving people and the UBI. What does technology mean to you?
That's a great question. So technology to me is advancement. I think oftentimes the connotation of technologies is in gizmos. For me, technology is beyond just that. It's not just the toys that we play with, even as adults, excuse me, but technology is anything that provides us the means for advancement. That to me is technology. And given what I was just saying, and let me be clear, I should have said this up front. I am not an anti-tech person. I'm all for the tech, absolutely for it. I'm grateful for the geniuses and the creatives who have envisioned a different future for us. The Steve Jobs of the world, who envisioned an iPhone and made it real, and has changed countless lives, has put such power in the hands of individuals that we've never seen before. That to me is a wonderful thing. So I am not anti-technology, but I do think perhaps the shininess of technology has captured our attention more and diverted our attention towards that shiny, whatever it might be, and away from humanity itself and what it means to be human, what it means to be equitable, what it means to create thriving societies, thriving communities, what it means to be family, what it means to be a neighbor. All of these things have been diminished. And that's the part that I think we as humanity, we need to kind of recheck ourselves. And we have to look at the fundamental reasons why. And part of that is our infatuation with technology. And I think these two things can coexist. That's the important lesson here. It's not, I'm not advocating that we get rid of technology or that we put the brakes on technology or that I'm just advocating for the fact that we have to think more holistically about life and to think about what, when we talk about to thrive in a community, what does that mean? Does that mean having the nicest car and the biggest house and all the latest gadgets? That's not thriving, but that's what technology can give us. So there is something else, and it is that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's that self-actualization at the top. That's the key. Somebody brilliant once recently just told me that Maslow had some notes, unpublished notes, that there may have been a different peak in his hierarchy. And for anybody watching or listening, it was Fanni herself who educated me on this, but that it was the actualization of the community. And I couldn't agree more, because self-actualization is only good for the self. And that's not a bad thing. But there is that bigger picture, that there is that sense of community. And because one person achieving self-actualization, the value of that is limited, even for the person who achieved it. But if a community of people are able to achieve self-actualization, just think how advanced that community would be in terms of happiness and everything else. And oh, by the way, I didn't give the last example, speaking of happiness. If you turn to Dubai, when they were building their smart city strategy and plan, they created the happiness index. They're actually measuring their citizens' happiness, their residents, their constituents' happiness. They've achieved over 98% satisfaction rate with city services. I can't think of another community that comes within even striking distance of that. But it's really about what they chose to measure. And that's an important fact I didn't get to, because part of our old economic models is measuring GDP. And if that's great that you're measuring money and productivity and whatnot, but is that what really matters? If we're 65% more productive than we were in 1980, are we 65% happier? People today, they're not happy. We've lost sense of community. We've lost happiness. We've lost excitement at times. It's a real dangerous moment, in my opinion, when people lose happiness. You cannot, by definition, you cannot thrive without that happiness quotient that we all need. I think a happiness index is another great shift in terms of opportunities that we could be pursuing.
Thank you so much for including that. It matters what we measure, because it can indeed change our thinking and our approaches to what we want to achieve in the future. Oh, and I wanted to say that I love your notion of creating the future. We can envision a future and we can create it, because I'm all for conscious urban evolution, which means that we are consciously creating the future. It doesn't just happen to us. Mike, you have been very generous with your time and answers, and I would like to ask you, what would you like people to take away from the summit?
I think one of my greatest lessons for the summit is that there are a lot of people doing some amazing things in this world. And if you should be so brave as to watch the news or read the newspapers these days, it seems impossible to find a shred of good news anywhere. The reality is there's a lot of good things happening. And as I said before, our focus on technology or our focus on the negative is what I'm going to talk about now. If we can step back and expand our vision a little bit wider, we start to see all the good. And there's so many opportunities for us right now. Technology is a wonderful enabler. And I do think if we tackled the challenge of this broken economic model, the broken promise of technology, if it did make our lives actually better, if it did free up more of our time to be more present in our daily lives, more present with our family, more present with our neighbors, more present with ourselves, how many of us think about going to the gym? I've been thinking about going to the gym for over a decade. Thinking about it just isn't good enough, and don't have to look any further than my waistline to prove it. The fact of the matter is, we don't take the time We don't have the time. And yet we have more technology now than ever. So all that efficiency, all of that time saving, all of that advancement, where did it actually get us? So that's where one of the big things I'm taking away is that this is a world with challenges. It's always going to have its challenges, but this is also a world full of amazing people creating the solutions that we need to those challenges. And bringing that group of people together to explore the possibilities of tomorrow, I think, is the most exciting part of the summit.
And as one of these people, how are you and leading cities working creating better future? Is there any project you are proud of and would like to share with the audience?
Didn't even get into this, but I'm very proud of a lot of things, but particularly talking about the creative efforts that are happening out there, people who are envisioning better future and working hard to create it. Leading Cities runs the largest startup accelerator of its kind in the world. It's called AcceliCity. We just completed our application period for this year's QBE AcceliCity Resilience Challenge. We had over 822 applications from 71 countries. I'll talk about applicants, I'll talk about startups, I'll talk about entrepreneurs, but what these are people who are dedicating their lives to improving communities for all of us. So that's really exciting to me. I'm also excited that we have partnered with the Red Cross to create another version, another edition of this later in the year, the QBE AcceliCity Humanitarian Challenge. So more on that to come. We'll open applications for that one in the fall. So please stay tuned for that. But I'm super excited about what that can do. In Leading Cities, we recently partnered with the Clinton Global Initiative and made a commitment to deploy 100 innovative solutions, 100 innovative resiliency solutions in 100 communities by 2030. And the reason that excites me so much is it is taking all of these brilliant minds and impactful startups that come through our AcceliCity program, for instance, and it's applying those solutions into communities. And that's when we actually see impact happening. That's when we start to move the needle. But a pilot, for instance, only moves the needle so much. So the last thing I'm really excited about and proud of is a new initiative of Leading Cities that we call LC3. What that's really about is leveraging capital for public projects, not privatizing public services, but recognizing there is not a shortage of capital in this world. There is plenty of capital. The biggest challenge we have is connecting those sources of capital to the projects we need. And so LC3 does just that. It brings in private investment into public projects so the communities can deploy these solutions to implement these projects. It's oftentimes no cost to the community, and it generates revenue or expenses, has a public benefit, or all three. So that to me is super exciting because that's when we really start to move the needle, because we're talking about now scaling pilot projects and generating impact for everybody, not just a select few in a pilot area or whatever. So those are some of my exciting points.
Please keep up this good work because we need this kind of thinking and solutions. So thank you so much for your time today. Do you have any closing comments or requests for the audience, Mike?
First of all, I do want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me here and make this possible. I want to thank the viewers and listeners for sticking to the end here. I hope I didn't pontificate or ramble too much, but these are things I am passionate about. And frankly, I'm turning to all of you to come up with these solutions. Leading Cities can be your partner to get them implemented, but you need to develop them. I don't have that kind of brilliance or creativity. My final words of encouragement is just to continue to imagine that future. Imagine what we can achieve. Imagine what we should be achieving and start working on it. Start creating that future. It's not just what distinguishes us from all species, but it's what will determine the lives that we live and what we leave for legacy for generations to come.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you.
If you want to learn more about Mike and Lake, links will be provided in the show notes, and the Smart Cities Council website can enable you even more. What have you learned from this interview? What questions do you have after listening to Mike? What would you like to know more about? Let us know on the Smart Cities Council website or on LinkedIn. Look out for other episodes and topical discussions, and thanks for tuning.